Learning Japanese is like farting in public. At first, it's quite embarrassing, but over time, you slowly start to get a little bit better at it. Of course, you'll only ever be a little bit better than shit, though. So now that I have you sufficiently hooked from my amazing humor, my name is Elder. I used to work for a Japanese language YouTube company, as you can see here, and I don't know why they really hired me. Didn't really know Japanese at the time, but they did, and I worked there. So that gives me some credibility, I think. I'm also currently learning Japanese, and have been doing so for the last 8 months or so. And I live in Japan, so I guess it's kind of, I hope that's enough. That's gotta be enough. So now that introductions are out of the way, first things first, should you even be learning this language? So in order to answer the question of if you should learn Japanese, I've broken it down into 3 parts for you. The first of which being, why do you need to learn this language? What is the point? The second being, how are you going to use this language once you've learned it? The why might be interesting, but if you have no actual use cases for Japanese, then you might not actually ever be able to fully learn it. And then the third thing is, how autistic are you? The United States government actually requires their diplomats to study for 2,200 hours, or approximately like 54 weeks or so, if I can do that math correctly. So suffice it to say, if you actually want to learn the language, you need a pretty good why. Something that'll motivate you over the course of the few years that you'll have to take in actually studying the language. What you're doing with the language after you've learned it is also really important. That feeds into the why a little bit, and is also how you'll be retaining the language in the future. If all you want to do is learn Japanese so that way you can better understand anime, I've seen it time and time again, and that just simply isn't a sufficient reason to study the language. You don't have enough end goal in mind in order to actually be able to acquire it and to be able to maintain it once you've acquired it. And then finally, how autistic are you really? This is a really important question because in order to learn this language, you are going to need to dedicate at least 3 to 10 years of your life, most likely, in studying it. So I recommend a high degree of autism in order to move forward with studying Japanese. So maybe you have a sufficient reason to study the language. Your why is good, what you're gonna do with it later is good, and you're sufficiently autistic to get the job done. Or maybe not, I don't know, I'm not God, and I mean, I wasn't gonna stop you anyways. I needed to finish the video, so. I'm gonna give you 4 different methods as to how you can go through and learn the language. I'm gonna rate each of those 4 different methods on 3 axes. 1, cost, 2, convenience, and 3, effort. I'll be rating those 4 methods from easiest to hardest. Let's get started. The first method I like to call the weeb method. It's basically where you go through and you watch anime and listen to Japanese music and, I don't know, maybe have a pretend Japanese waifu, or 2, or 3, or maybe a lot of Japanese waifus. Now this method has to be the easiest, most convenient, and depending on how crippling your addiction to anime is, the most cost-effective of the 4 methods. All you really have to do is watch anime and think a little bit actively about the words that you're listening to. You can pretty easily learn oni-chan and sumimasen and some really basic Japanese phrases through this method. So method number 2 is when you decide to actually put a little bit of work in. You sweaty weeaboo. This is where you're gonna actually go through and download a set of flashcards, and you wanna add like things like the words that you're learning in your anime, right? Like oni-chan or, I don't know, senpai, right? Whatever you guys do, I don't know. I mean, I live here, I'm a weeb too. But like, I never really got it. I never went to a con or anything. Anyways, so yeah, this method is pretty good because you're no longer putting in the minimum amount of effort. You're actually doing a little bit more work than you were before, and actively trying to learn through the flashcards and engaging with the decks. So basically, you just go through, you download Anki finally, or you get one of the various Japanese language learning apps that are out there that have flashcards built into them, and you put in a little bit more than the bare minimum amount of effort. So this is still going to be a very convenient, typically very free method, but you will be putting in a little bit more effort. Thank God, because if you are actually serious about learning this language, this is where I would recommend that you start off. The third method is where things start to get a little bit more interesting. You have decided to put a lot more effort into your Japanese studies. You've taken on a Japanese language tutor. Yay, Japanese language tutor. What this means for you, though, is that it's going to be less convenient. It's going to be a bit more effort, depending on how good your tutor is and whether or not you're able to meet with them consistently and what type of work they're giving you. And then it's also going to be the first of the 4 methods that will require you to pay. If you're paying for the flashcards and everything like that, I'm not really including that in this list because you can do it for free using Anki or various apps. Now, the tutoring method comes with a couple of different benefits. One, you actually get to go through and speak and listen to someone rather than just practicing on your own in the mirror at home.
助けを。本当に日本語できませんよ。
And 2, you have an accountability partner. So not only are you able to actually practice speaking the language and listening to a native speaker, and not just your favorite waifu, but you are accountable to meet with them and having to actually practice the language with them. And finally, we have method number 4. This is what I like to call the try hard, die hard method. It's basically where you go through and you pick up your entire life and you move to Japan. That's what I did in my case. Method number 4 is great if you actually have a reason to come to Japan, right? I would not recommend that you come here just to learn the language if you have no plan as to what you're going to do afterwards. It kind of defeats the purpose of the what you're going to do afterwards. Sure, you've come here, you spent all this money, you've learned the language, but then what are you gonna do with it, right? You live here now, are you gonna work? Could you not have done that wherever you're from? So this method is going to be the most strenuous of all of the 4 methods. It's gonna cost you the most, it's gonna take the most amount of effort, and it's gonna be the least convenient because you're gonna have to pick up your entire life and, I don't know, maybe you have to give away your dog. Penny, I miss you. And you'll have to say goodbye to everything that you know and love. In exchange, you get anime titties and a lot of loneliness and depression. Today we've gone over if you should learn Japanese, and given that you actually have a legitimately decent reason or are just sufficiently crazy, how you could go about doing it. I've laid out 4 different methods as to how you could go through and get started, going from the easiest to the hardest, and hopefully giving you maybe a little bit more of an understanding as to what your options look like in that regard. Thank you so much, and if you haven't seen my other content, I have a challenge going on where I need to get up to 1,000 subscribers. So if you found this video even remotely helpful, do a man a solid and I don't know, subscribe or something. I'm posting every day. I'll see you later. Bye.